All right, no time for lollygagging. We got to beat Dreadnoughts today in the video that we're going to be talking about. So basically, Blizzard announced some Mythic Plus dungeon tuning, which is going to be affecting Atal'Dazar while nerfing Dawn of the Infinites and Throne of the Tides. Basically, what they said is data and feedback suggest that Murozond's Rise, Throne of the Tides, and Atal'Dazar are outliers in terms of difficulty, while Murozond's Rise and Throne of the Tides are too difficult. Atal'Dazar is proving too easy and may affect player progression through the content in a negative way. I actually agree with this. I'm interested in seeing like if these changes are going to be enough and like what they end up being. So for Atal'Dazar, the required enemy forces count for Atal'Dazar has been increased. I don't think that this is the right way of approaching this dungeon personally. I would have maybe just actually hit the dungeon with like a flat 20% health modifier or something like that on all of the mobs. I felt like a lot of the issues in the dungeon isn't necessarily count based, although this is a way that Blizzard has. This is a tool that Blizzard has to slow down the dungeon. I think a lot of it's come down to the fact that I feel like trash is just dying at a much faster rate in Atal'Dazar than it is in other keys. And on top of that, you can 3-chest in Atal'Dazar that you would only be fucking barely timing in another key, especially like you would 3-chest it in Atal'Dazar with 17 deaths and stuff like that. There's some other changes to Atal'Dazar. Yasmin's Racking Pain can no longer be interrupted and is no longer a curse effect in Mythic Keystone difficulty. That's the cast that the boss or that the tank would always kick. It didn't do a small amount of damage. I'm kind of interested in seeing like how much this really is going to actually do. This makes this boss a lot more tricky. This was already a pretty hard fight in Atal'Dazar in general, and now your healer is actually going to have to deal with this Racking Pain dot on players pretty often. I don't know if this is maybe the correct solution, but I'm interested in seeing what this looks like. For Priestess Alunza, Corrupting Blood inflicts damage every 2.5 seconds was 3 seconds, and the Spirit of Gold's health was increased by 3%. So these are the only two bosses. I don't think that, personally, I don't think that the Corrupted Blood should do damage to Priestess Alunza. I feel like that is a not healthy way of actually dealing with that boss. I think that boss should not be dealing damage to itself, especially the fact that more often than not, you have it doing about 50% of its 50% of the boss's HP to itself. That's super stupid. Now it's going to be a little bit lower, but I don't like the fact that you deal damage to the boss. I think that should be completely changed. If I was buffing Atal'Dazar, that would probably be something that's on my list. Aside from that, there's some stuff that got nerfed. Toxic Sard's Leaping Thrash no longer triggers Poison Claws on the target. That's good. Maybe they could go ahead and make the Sarids not be able to be affected by no path available spots anymore, potentially. Same with like the Juggernaut's Merciless Assault. Maybe this is going to be coinciding with a change where the Juggernauts are no longer able to be LOS'd, where their Merciless Assault actually goes off into players, but it's doing 25% reduced damage. On top of that, the Augur's Wildfire periodic rate reduced to 1 second was previously 2 seconds. I think it's a buff. The Wildfire periodic rate reduced to 1 second was 2 seconds. Does this mean that it ticks every 1 second as opposed to 2 seconds? This doesn't necessarily make sense exactly how it reads. It sounds like it's a buff to the Augurs. The Augur's Wildfire is the dot that it places on the players if you let that go off. So I'm interested in seeing that. Dynamancer, Deadeye Aim reduced by 25%. This is the mid-pack main mob. This mob was illegal. I think that this is a fine change. Frenzy Charge is now avoidable. It inflicts increased damage, and then Wild Thrash range now increased to 100 yards. Frenzy Charge was the one that would target players. Now I suspect it's just like a frontal, or like a traditional charge. All right, so Murozond's Rise. I think the issue with me. Okay, so basically, let me summarize. I think the Atal'Dazar changes are fine. I think that overall, I'm not opposed to these Atal'Dazar changes. I think that increasing the amount of count that you needed in here is okay, and it's a good step in the right direction. I'm interested in seeing what it looks like next week after we test it out. I would have maybe gone a little bit different direction in terms of like HP of mobs as opposed to amount of count that you need, because I think the count in here is largely okay, but I'm interested in seeing what it looks like. So I'm kind of excited to see what the Atal'Dazar looks like. It was by far the easiest dungeon, so I think it makes sense that they're buffing it. And I think now is the right time to buff the dungeon. Like, buffs to Mythic Plus dungeons are pretty infrequent. They're few and far between. And I think that like if there's ever a time, it's like early on in the season that it needs to happen. Murozond's Rise. I think that the problem with Murozond's Rise is that the timer is much too tight. I don't think that the dungeon is that hard. I don't think it's easy, but I don't think it's that hard relative to other dungeons, but I think that the timer is quite a bit tighter than other dungeons, and this is going to be doubly true on Tyrannical, because you have Tyr. I think that this is going to... So they are nerfing the Radiant Barrier whenever he goes and channels on the Oathstone. The shield is going to be lower. I still think this is probably going to be problematic on Tyrannical. And then the other major nerf to the dungeon is Deos, health reduced by 10%, infinite corruption damage reduced by 20%, anomalies, untwist damage by 20%, time displacement reduces the creature's health by additional 10%, time displacement on death damage effect. So basically they're nerfing Deos a little bit. I don't think... Okay, now, I think that Murozond's Rise is hard, but I don't think it was hard because of Deos and Tyr specifically. I do think that Tyr was challenging. I think that the hardest boss in that dungeon is Battlefield, and I think that the reason that dungeon was so challenging is because the timer is not very forgiving. On top of that, Sanguine was like a bit tough in there, but it's neither here nor there. The Sand Gauntlet is also a bit rough. And so those are the things that I would have been looking to hit in Murozond's Rise. I'm down for these changes. I think that these are all pretty good. And I was going to kind of hammer Tyr in a video tomorrow. So basically, I'm releasing a video tomorrow talking about the weekly affixes, kind of the dungeons that you should be looking to do, maybe the dungeons that you should be looking to avoid, how Tyrannical is going to impact keys and stuff like that. I was going to talk about Tyr, I think, at length with a couple of other bosses on how they're going to be impacted by Tyrannical. I think these are fine. I think that maybe something else is going to need to come to Murozond's Rise. I think that this is still a little bit hard of a dungeon. Throw the Tides is way too hard. The Trash is way too challenging in here. I think that unilateral nerfs to all of the Trash in here was what I would be expecting. So let's kind of see what they've done. Reduce the total number of unstable corruptions spawns, and unstable corruptions now spawn more consistently in the Abyssal Halls. This is the Gauntlet area. The unstable corruptions of the mobs that put the increased shadow damage taken debuff on you whenever they die. And so now with reduction of the amount of them that spawn, it's going to make the Gauntlet a little bit less deadly. I think that the unstable corruptions, while the sentries were a main source of the damage because of the Swell cast, which is also getting nerfed by 15%, I think that the amount of unstable corruptions and the amount of damage that they are doing is typically what I have saw would end up killing people all the time. And those mobs were crazy. So yeah, Tainted Guardian's Swell damage reduced by 15%. That's good. I don't think it's Tainted Guardian. I think it's Tainted Sentry, isn't it? Hopefully this is the right mob. But Swell damage reduced by 15%. Excellent. Great change. Vicious Snapdragons. These are the mobs that fixate players and put the bleed on them. They were stupid. Vicious Snapdragons, Razor Jaws inflicts damage every 1.5 seconds, was previously 1 second. The health has been reduced by 20%. That's all that changes about these mobs. I think that the weird part for me is that the mobs fixate is not CCable, and they charge you when they fixate you. And so it's hard to get them off of you once they have gotten onto you, and they end up stacking up their bleed infinitely. Maybe the nerf to the bleed being every 1.5 seconds is going to be enough. At minimum, the Snapdragon health being reduced by 20%, plus we're going to a Tyrannical setting this week, it's definitely going to help a lot. So we'll see how that works. Gilgoblin Aquamage health reduced by 20%, and Gilgoblin Aquamage's Aqua Blast cast time increased to 4 seconds, was previously 3.75. I skipped a lot of these mobs. I didn't play them because I didn't think that they, first off, were not very efficient, and second off, they required a lot of stops, and they weren't very good. Health reduced by 20% makes them better. It's tough because I think increasing cast time to 4 seconds is nice, but at the same point, there's so many of them in trash packs. Like the density of the Gilgoblin Aquamages, I think, is the problem, not necessarily the length of their cast. And I think that this is still a situation where you need AoE interrupts, like Silent Sigil, like Solar Beam, like whatever the Demo Shout Warrior thing is, the Interrupting Shout Warrior thing is. On top of that, the Nazjatar's Sentinel's Crushing Depths heal absorb amount has been reduced by 15%. This is it's the heal absorb that's at the very beginning of the dungeon. It's LOSable. It's also like reflectable and stuff. At the same point, it needed to be reduced. The amount of HP that needed to be healed through was way too high. Frankly, it's way too high. And so I'm glad that that's actually being nerfed. I think that's... I wouldn't be shocked if it gets nerfed again. Like this was way out of line. Awesome, Matt. This is the final boss. It's the Blotting Barrage guy, where you have to clear the ink. Blotting Barrage damage reduced by 15%. This is probably just the ground effect. Blotting Darkness Oh, okay, so no, Blotting Barrage is the debuff. So the debuff drop has been reduced by 15%. The ground effect has also been reduced by 25%, which is good. Neptulon's Cleansing Flux duration is increased to 12 seconds, was 10 seconds. Foul Bolt now has an 8-second initial cool-up, and Splotch spawns closer to the Ink of Ozimat. So it spawns adds closer to the boss. That's nice. Ultimately, this boss hasn't changed functionally how it works. Now, it's easier to not completely run out of room, and there, with 2 additional seconds on the Cleansing Flux, there's probably a way to play catch-up. Previously, the issue with Ozimat, and the issue that I've always had with this boss, is the fact that if you ever fall behind on cleansing the boss, you completely run out of space in the room. I'm not sure if it going from 10 to 12 seconds is going to completely fix that, but it definitely helps you be more consistent with your cleansing, and I think that that's something that is a good change overall. I think that Throne of the Tides, these changes, while I was maybe a little bit skeptical about Murozond's Rise and the Atal'Dazar ones, about like, are these the right ways of addressing this exactly? I think these are exactly what I would have done for Throne of the Tides. I think that they kind of fit the spot with these. Galakrond's Fall. Matron Alma's Lingering Dead should prefer non-tank players. This is like... Hold on. This is like the debuff that is a curse that explodes, right? Let me make 100% sure. Lingering Dread. Yeah. Okay, so this is the debuff that would always get put on the tank that would explode, and then it put shadow damage on everybody that was surrounding the tank. I mean, maybe it makes Matron Alma a little bit more deadly. I don't know necessarily how much more deadly this is going to be. Felspite Dominator's Sick Bats will now command up to 4 bats to attack their targets. Was previously unlimited. That's good. I think that there was an issue whenever you would have too many Dominators pulled and you would get sicked by the whole entire pack of bats, and if you were in melee, you would immediately die. I'm interested in seeing like how this works. Is it like the 4 closest bats to that Dominator? Like, what is that really going to look like? I would still probably recommend either having a Horn Sound and Bigwigs or a Weak Aura whenever the Sick Bats is cast onto you, but great change. Oakheart's Crushing Grip, throw damage reduced by 15%. This was largely due to the fact that some tanks, I think like Prot Paladin was probably having a hard time of dealing with Crushing Grip. I mean, a lot of that comes down to the fact that you're getting picked up at a Consecrate as a Prot Paladin too, but overall, the Crushing Grip damage was quite high. You needed like externals a lot. I think this is a good change. No complaints. Maddening Roar, which is the Drossaron AoE, increases... Oh, no. This isn't the Drossaron AoE. This is the Bear AoE. I see. This is different from the Drossaron Maddening Roar. This increases damage dealt by 20% per second, was previously 25. I'm interested in hearing what you guys think in the comment section, but like, I'm pretty sure that you're still not doing the bears. The double bear is like illegal. 1 bear is fine, but double bear is like not efficient, and I think they're still overtuned. Like the amount of damage that they're doing is still really high. Once you hit like 4 stacks, you're probably dead. In like a lower level key, I don't think it really matters too much, but like once you start to push higher levels, I think it's still pretty tough. Yeah, last dungeon, Galakrond's Fall. Risen Dragons, so these are the dragons that are at the very end of the dungeon. The Necrotic Outburst inflicts damage every 3 seconds, was previously 2 seconds. I didn't get farmed by Throne of the Tide swells because I got really lucky. I got farmed by an abnormally large amount of these Risen Dragons, though. I think that a lot of people like to pull 2 at a time on accident because they didn't realize how dangerous they were really going to be, and realized very quickly that you can only pull 1 of them at a time. But I'm glad that they're nerfing them. I think that dealing damage every 3 seconds as opposed to every 2 seconds is a positive change. I still don't think that they're quite efficient enough to where I'm like happy to play them. But if I'm less likely to get corpse camped by them, no complaints. This is the big thing. Coalesce Moments Tainted Sands no longer does damage immediately, and its duration has been reduced to 7 seconds, was 9 seconds. This shit was awful. I think this was by far the hardest dungeon out, or the hardest part of Galakrond's Fall. The Sands debuff that you would get randomly put onto your player was way too hard. It did way too much damage. But yeah, that's it for the dungeon changes. I think overall I'm actually pretty happy with all of this stuff. These are about all the things that, like, if you asked me before recording this video, what do you expect to change? These are all about things that I would have expected. I would have maybe have gone a little bit of a different direction for how I would have buffed Atal'Dazar and nerfed Murozond's Rise. But like, at the end of the day, I'm glad that they're starting to move in a good direction. Blizzard has generally been pretty good in regards to what they're doing for Mythic Plus tuning, and they're pretty quick on the trigger of being able to like buff and nerf dungeons if they see that they are necessary. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts down in the comment section. Were you guys surprised to see any dungeons or anything that was like missed here? What are you guys kind of expecting? Tomorrow, I'm also going to be doing a video talking about the dungeons you should be looking forward to and avoiding on Tyrannical. Going to kind of like tier the dungeons and going to kind of talk about just what the state of the affixes are going to be looking like for this next reset. Hope you guys all have been enjoying the content, and I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.